Hi, this is Patrycja from Hayes Sewing Machine Company. Today we're going to show you how to work with the design suites that are available for the Baby Lock Solaris. These are additional designs that will let you do quilting patterns for your IQ designer. So for example, this sample that we have was using the Fabric Confetti collection. They have several different collections they're releasing. You can scan the QR code and it will show you the different designs that are built in. So just to give you an idea on this particular sample, if you can see how we have the little birds right there. So the birds are one of the designs that are built into this collection. We also have owls, which are in this collection. And then we have like little swirls, which are also in this collection. So this entire sample was done using the Fabric Confetti. Today we're going to be working with a new collection that has been released. This is the Fills and Motifs Hobbies #1. So when you scan the QR code, it's really hard to see the designs on the back. They don't show them all. So I like using the QR code. That way I can download myself a little cheat sheet. We happen to have a book table runner that we were working with, so I'm going to do a sample using the book outline fills that are built into this particular program. So we are going to treat this as a quilting with your embroidery machine project. And if you take a look in our YouTube channel, if you've never done this particular technique, we do have a YouTube video that goes into more details. So I'm just going to work on the design suite part of it for you today. I already have my table runner layered up, so I have my quilt top, my batting, and my backing. And I have done a little bit of measurements, and this particular table runner is about 16 inches wide, about 15 to 16, so it'll work in our biggest hoop. And because we're doing this as a
edge to edge?
Edge to edge outline quilting design, we're just going to start at one end of the table runner and just work our way down. If you were doing a bigger quilt, you could certainly position them a little bit different. If you wanted to start in the middle and work your way out, that's up to you. But for our technique today, we're just going to start at one end. So I have it hooped. I have a little bit of excess on the side because I want to overlap a little bit on the edge, so that way I have a nice clean design. On my machine, I have my thread already set up. I have cotton thread in the bottom, and I have a polyester embroidery thread on top, just so that way it looks a little bit pretty and shiny because I'm going for a more decorative look. We do have our embroidery needle in the machine, and then we're going to attach our hoop. So we're going to click it into position. And then we're going to move this out of the way. You can also roll it. There is something called jaws if you need to hold the quilt kind of out of the way. And this will be a project I do need to sit with. I really don't want to walk away from it because I don't want to get any of my excess fabric caught. We're going to go to our IQ designer, and we're going to create a box to kind of be our barrier in which we're going to put our fill patterns. Now, I like to make the box actually a little bit smaller than my embroidery field rather than just going ahead and filling the whole embroidery field, because when I go to rehoop my next section, if I filled the whole embroidery hoop, I have to rehoop this perfectly the next time. And if I don't get it quite right, then I need to rehoop and rehoop until I get it lined up. So if I make a box a little bit smaller than my embroidery field, when I go to do my next hooping, I don't have to worry about hooping it perfectly because I can manipulate the design a little bit, move it up, shift it down, rotate it if I need to. So in order to create our box, we're going to go to our shapes. I'm going to select the second grouping of shapes, and the reason I do it for this technique is because the second grouping of shapes are just fills. There are no outlines on here, so I don't have to worry about an extra line showing up in my field or having to designate the line to be a no-sew line. By selecting this grouping, it will automatically just be a fill and have no outlines that I need to worry about. We're going to select number 1, that'll be our square, and then you'll see that we already have something filled in there. That's okay, we can ignore that for the moment. We're going to go to size, and then we're going to make the box bigger. Now, if you have an original Solaris, then you can just use these arrows in order to make it bigger or smaller. If you have the Solaris Vision, or if you have a Solaris with some of the updates, you have the keypad. And I love having the keypad because I can just go ahead and type in the numbers of the size that I want my object to be, rather than using the arrows. So our embroidery field is about 10 and 5/8 by 16 inches, so I'm going to just make it slightly smaller. So for our height, I'm going to make it 15 inches, and we're going to hit set. And so that gives me about a 1/2 inch wiggle room top and bottom, which will be just fine for my project. And then my width, we're going to make about 10 1/4. And so that will fill in most of the embroidery field area, but you'll see I have about a 1/4 inch on the sides, and that gives me a little wiggle room if I did not hoop things correctly. We're going to hit OK. So we now want to go ahead and put in our decorative fills. So I'm going to take the USB stick, and we're going to pop it into the side of the machine. I do like putting it into the top USB port, and when we go into our decorative area, so our region property, we're going to select our decorative fills. I'm going to hit select. So these are all of the designs that are built in for the IQ designer fills, and we have a custom box. So we're going to select that custom box, and you'll see I have scissors. This is actually from the same collection. It was a project that I was working on earlier. And so when you're looking at the designs, you'll notice that there's a whole bunch of different fills that are on that USB port. I don't tend to bring them all over because we do have a finite amount of space. So I basically can just work with this area, which I think ends up being either 9 or 12 images that you can have on here, and then you have to start deleting them off. So we can't take every single fill and put it in, so I only put in the fills that I'm using at the moment. So we're going to select the picture of the pocket. That will let us go to the USB stick, and we're going to select the fills. So those are the fills, and then there is my book fill. We're going to hit OK, and you'll see how it now pops up on here. And again, you can have, I'm pretty sure it's 3 across and either 3 down or 4 down. So you can have between 9 to 12 on here. If you need to delete them because you want to bring in some extras, you can hit clear all, and it will delete those patterns that you've brought in, so you can bring in extras or your next ones. So let's go ahead and bring in the books again. And we're going to hit OK, and so now you'll see how it shows up as the option. We're going to hit OK, and then we want to make sure that our bucket is selected because the bucket will completely fill in. We're going to touch our red area, and there are my books. I'm going to hit next so I can get a better visual of what it's going to actually look like as it sews out. Now, the books for me are a little bit too dense, so I would like to open up or spread out, enlarge the pattern. So you'll notice how we have some options over on the side here that let us edit that fill. So the first one that we're going to do is we're going to select the size. So this will let us take the design down about 50%, and I believe up to about 200%. And then when you hit OK, you can take a look at it and see what it looks like before committing to it. I like how it's more open now, but as I'm looking at it, I'll notice how we have a little bit of the sides showing here. So if I sew it out like this, when I go to do my next hooping, I'm going to have parts of the books chopped off. So for me, that's not as appealing. So I'm going to go ahead and shrink this down, and I'm just going to keep shrinking it down and kind of just hitting the OK and looking at it until I get to something that looks pleasing to me. Now when I go down to about 130% and I'm looking at this, I actually like the proportion. Now looking at this, it almost looks like I have half a column here and half a column here, which actually, if I shift the pattern over, I might be able to get 2 columns of books without having to get little pieces chopped off, so it might be a little bit easier for me to line things up. So another cool thing that you can do is the pattern shift button. And the pattern shift button, or actually the position offset, I make up my own name sometimes, will let you physically take the design and move it side to side. Now when you're doing this technique, you want to change it a lot. So if you just move it like 1 or 2 clicks, it's not going to really show up. But if you move it more, it makes more of a difference. So I actually don't want to go up and down. What I really want to do is I want to go side to side. So I recommend kind of playing with this, and then you can see what it looks like. And the advantage of doing this before you stitch anything out is you can see and be like, yes, I'm going to be happy with that, or no, I don't like it, so let's change it before I spend my time embroidering it out. Now, can you see how the books are starting to shift? So I'm starting to see less on this side and more on this side. So that's going in the direction I want. So we're just going to keep hitting this position offset button until I get it to have all of the books as much on the page as possible. And this is where it does just take a little bit of playing around. And what I also like to do is I'll sometimes write down these numbers. So once I have a spot that I like, I write them down just so that way when I go to do my projects, I can make sure that everything looks good. And I will also save them. Oh, there we go. That to me looks very pleasing. I have 2 rows of books, and in the corners are pretty much almost on there absolutely. Let's see what happens if I go a little bit more. So now I'm starting to get a little bit of some extra stitching in there, which I don't think I want. So let's back this down a little bit more. So see how you can like really play and get this lined up exactly how you want it to be and make it look as pleasing to you as possible. I think we're just going to stick to 2.6 possibly. There we go. So once you have everything done and we're ready to embroider, when I hit the next button, I get this pop-up message. It says, converted to the embroidery pattern and IQ Designer will be exited. Okay to continue to embroidery edit screen. I want you to get into the habit of hitting cancel and saving this design. See how you have memory? So because we've done so much editing and playing around and changing the size, I don't want to have to do this every single time I come to do this pattern. So by saving the design pattern as a editable pattern on here, so it's still a design file, it's not actually stitch files yet, that means I can go back and edit and change things if I need to. You have the option of saving to your machine or a USB stick, so if you use up the space on your machine, by all means put a USB stick in there. I tend to just go ahead and save it to the machine. You're better off saving it more times and not needing it than never saving it and needing it. Now this will also give you a message. This is where the difference comes in between the design suite patterns that are on the USB stick and the patterns that are built into the machine. So remember how I was saying you can only have up to like 9 or 12 patterns originally? So if you delete one of those patterns, then you're not going to be able to access this design. So just be aware of that. Remember I was saying, if we fill up that space, you can delete a pattern, but I would not delete that pattern until you have finished this project. This is also why I do like to write down these notes, or maybe take a picture with your cell phone if that makes it easier, because I have done quite a bit of editing to this pattern, and if I want to recreate it again later, if I have these numbers, it's just going to make it so much easier for me to be able to recreate the pattern rather than trying to have to do it all over again from scratch. So now we're going to hit set, and then it's going to say, all right, we're going to leave IQ Designer. Are you ready to go to embroidery edit? And then there is our embroidery pattern. So we're going to go ahead and hit embroidery because that looks great to me. Now when we look at the machine part, it's in my hoop. Whenever you bring a design in, the needle's always going to be in the center. That's just the default. But 99.99 times out of 10, it never actually starts sewing in this spot. So when we are doing an outline quilting pattern, we like to bring up our bobbin thread to the top because that will give us a cleaner look on the back. But if I do this right now and the machine moves to another spot, I'm going to get a little hiccup in that spot. So anytime I'm doing an outline quilting pattern, I always like to forward one stitch. So we're going to select the needle plus minus, and we're going to select the needle plus 1. And what that does is it moves the design one stitch. So it's really just moving it up to the spot that it's going to start stitching out. And this is the spot where I'm going to go ahead and bring up my bobbin thread before I start embroidering. So we're going to hold our top thread. When I was putting my bobbin in, I did leave a longer tail as opposed to cutting it short. So if you didn't do that, you can go back and do that real quick. It just makes it easier to bring up our bobbin thread when you have that longer tail, because then I can grasp it easier. I like using the needle up down button on the front of the machine because it's just easier, and I try to do things as easy as possible. We're just going to pull on the thread and I can grab from underneath, and so now I have both my top thread and my bobbin thread in my hand. We are going to make a knot so that way the thread will stay in place and it doesn't get tangled up. I like using the button here, and the machine is very bossy. It says you need to put your presser foot down. Alright, so we're going to put our presser foot down, and then I'm going to go ahead and use the knotting feature, and that will physically do 3 to 4 stitches in place. So it will create a knot, and then I can go ahead and cut the thread. We're going to trim up that thread, and then we're going to go ahead and hit start, and it will start embroidering. Now again, this is a project that I will stay with. You can actually see as my machine is moving back and forth how the fabric starts to come over here, and I don't want to get any of my fabric caught, so I do tend to stay with it just so that way I don't have to seam rip or anything out. So we're gonna let it go ahead and embroider the first hooping. So we finished embroidering our first section, so we're going to go ahead and take it off of the hoop and then rehoop so we can do our next section. So I have the first section done. We're going to go ahead and rehoop our fabric, and when we're hooping up, because I'm working with kind of a tight space, I do want to hoop as best as I can, but again, we'll use the camera to kind of fine tune. When you're looking on the hoop, you'll notice that there's these marks here. So this will kind of give you an idea of where you want to stay within, so that way we can make sure that we are grabbing that spot. So when we go to hoop, it will be able to do it right next to it. I have rehooped my fabric and we're ready to move on to our second embroidery. So we're still going to work with the same design, so I'm not going to worry about changing anything there, but we do want to make sure it's placed correctly. So I'm going to use the camera function on the Solaris, so that way we can actually scan and have the machine take a picture of my project physically in the hoop. And this is also going to start showing up some of our other stitching from the previous hooping, and that's going to help me to line things up better. So you'll see how we now have a picture of our previous stitching kind of on the side right here, and then we have our new stitching showing up. Now, if you have a hard time kind of seeing it in order to be able to line it up, we can change the color. So let's maybe do like a blue and see if that makes it a little bit easier to see. Well, let's do kind of like this. There we go. So that on the screen will physically be easier for me to see in relation to my previous row of stitches. You'll see how they're still kind of showing up in that purple. So this is where I can go to my move button, and because I made the design a little bit smaller than my embroidery field, I have a little bit of maneuverability that I can try to move the design around and get my points to line up. Once I have it moved in position where I like it, I'm also going to use the projector that is on the Solaris. So that will let me get my points a little bit better. So when it brings in the preview, it's going to be usually in the middle. So I'm going to take that red square and I'm going to shimmy it down to this section here. Now, can you see how we can start seeing our stitches that are going to be sewn out? Let me see if we can zoom in a little more. So here's the new stitches next to my previous stitches. So this is where I can go back to my machine and start moving my design around a little bit more and see how I can get that much more fine-tuned and really get things to line up just right. So I like how that looks. We're going to go ahead and embroider into the next section. So here is our finished table runner, completely quilted and bound. So you can see all of the books in the background. They show up really nicely. Even though we did them on top of the focus fabrics on the books, they really pop in the background. So this is definitely a great project for the book lovers.